All right, well, it looks like most people are logged into the session. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Jerry Seibert, and I will be moderating our dialogue today. As we go along, if you have any questions, please use the Q&A feature, not the chat, and we will do our best to address all of the questions at the end of the session. We are recording the session, and that recording will be available in a few days. So organization development and transformation efforts are something that many of us have been involved with, and most of us have at least lived through. Sometimes they are successful with clear, measurable impact. Sometimes not so much. Of course, the former assumes that there is a good effort to actually measure the impact of the intervention. Well, today we're going to take a look at a case where there are some very clear metrics reflecting the impact of a comprehensive and fairly long-term intervention. The case we're talking about is with SECU Credit Union. SECU is headquartered in Linthicum, Maryland. It was founded in 1951 and over time has grown to become the largest credit union in the state with over 260,000 members, almost 400 employees, and more than $4 billion in assets. Along with their growth and success has come, in their view, a lot of responsibility, which they take very seriously. Responsibility not just to their members as a nonprofit financial institution, but to the community as a whole, through the SECU Maryland Foundation, a nonprofit organization that provides grants and assistance to other nonprofit organizations throughout Maryland. They really try and give back. They very much believe in giving back to the community. With me today, I have two guests, David Sweiderk, who joined SECU as president and CEO in 2018. Dave has over 25 years of experience leading high-performing financial services organizations, including executive-level management roles at First National Bank of Omaha, Sovereign Bank, and Chevy Chase Bank in Maryland. Over the last few years, Dave has been honored with a number of awards, including the Daily Record's Most Admired CEO in 2020, Power 100 in 2021, Influential Marylander in 2022. He was also named the Credit Union Hero of the Year by the National Credit Union Association in 2021, and a Power 10 CEO by the Baltimore Business Journal in 2022. My other guest is Jim Cardwell, founder and CEO of Cardwell Leadership. Jim is an advisor to CEOs, and he helps his clients succeed through organization-wide alignment and collaboration. He's the creator of Connections Online, a high-performance organization process supported by some custom SaaS software. He's well-known leadership coach and creator of the 306 Group, which is a private leadership forum for CEOs and high-potential number twos, focusing on board governance, strategy execution, transition leadership, and CEO impact. And his firm, Cardwell Leadership, is focused on building high-performance organizations through a deep understanding of the role of the CEO and their two critical stakeholders, the board and the leadership team. So they work with clients to strategically focus and simplify their businesses to accelerate leadership impact, teamwork, and culture engagement. Dave, Jim, thank you for joining us here today. Let me start by showing some key metrics from that date from just before the pandemic to the present time and reflect the journey that SECU has had. These are some operational metrics with the baseline in 2019 and 22 metrics based from just a few months ago at the end of the fiscal year. So the first one here, return on assets, it's a financial ratio that measures a company's profitability by evaluating the amount of net income it generates relative to total assets. In other words, it measures how efficiently a company is using its assets to generate profit. And we can see that, over this period at SECU, a very significant improvement in ROA. OPEX ratio, or operating expense ratio, is an important measure of a company's efficiency. It indicates how much of a company's assets are being used to cover operating expenses. So a higher expense ratio indicates a company is spending a larger proportion of assets or operating expenses, which can indicate inefficiencies in the company's operations. And conversely, a lower ratio indicates that a company is using its assets more efficiently to generate profits. And again, OPEX ratio moving absolutely in the right direction here with a significant decline since 2019. Customer satisfaction, it's a key metric for any business. And as we say in the credit union business, member satisfaction is up over 10 percentage points during this period. In fact, all in all, I believe that this may have been SECU's best year ever when it wrapped up in 2022. Now, achieving change like this requires strong leadership, absolutely, but also the support and active engagement of the workforce. In 2019, employee engagement was measured at 79%, which is not bad. There's a lot of organizations would love to have a baseline starting at that point. But of course, engagement is only a partial success driver. You can have highly engaged teams very happily working on the wrong priorities if they're not properly aligned. And even if they love their work and their manager and their peers, without the needed capabilities, teams won't be able to meet customer expectations. So in 2021, as some major changes were unfolding at the company, we began tracking more than engagement using an employee survey that I developed with Jim about 10 years ago to help gauge the impact of the types of changes he was introducing into his clients. And in that instrument, we covered engagement, of course, right? Are people finding meaning in their work? Are they energized by it, committed to the credit union and its goals, willing to be advocates for the organization? But also alignment of work, right? Is there a clear line of sight from individual to department to company goals, what I call vertical alignment, as well as lateral alignment, right? With all the teams and leaders really rowing in the same direction. Is there accountability? Because when there is accountability, employees work more effectively together, understanding and achieving joint goals, able to count on others and be confident that support is there when it's needed. And do they have the capabilities, right? Which means, are there the right people with the right skills, tools, information, and processes to execute the strategy and deliver for customers, whether your customers are members or other groups within the credit union, right? Not everybody is customer facing. And finally, we had a dimension called feedback and dialogues, looking at effective communication, which is really necessary within teams at every level, from the C-suite down to the branch level, as well as communication between teams and between leaders and staff. And as you can see in these results, which cover from January 2021 to January 22, and the most recent one just a few months ago in January 2023, consistent improvement on all of these dimensions in the employee survey. Some of them starting fairly high, but still moving upward, and some of them, like accountability, starting with some pretty moderate scores and moving up into some large percentages of favorable responses. So with that, I'm going to stop with the data and start with a question for you, Dave. When you first came to SECU, what did you find, and what were some of the first things that you did?
Well, Jerry, thanks for having me today. And as a new CEO, as soon as you walk in the door, there's always this desire for everyone to know, what's your vision, where you're taking the organization. And first of all, I think it's important to honor the past. I wouldn't have gotten the opportunity if it wasn't for those folks before me. So, but I think it's important that you kind of stay away from, I think everyone wants to hear a certain asset size or something that's one of those big, sexy goals. And I thought it was important to work on the values. Not that I thought there was an issue with the values of the organization, but I felt like we could put some concrete guiding principles right from day one to set kind of the course of the organization. And just very quickly, the four guiding principles I landed on after asking a bunch of questions and starting to do some research were four things. One, we made a commitment to put the heart in banking. And that's a pretty heavy duty statement. But the reality of it is we knew that we needed to make emotional connections with our employees, our members, and the communities we serve. Two, we were going to be employee focused and member centric. And everybody uses those words, but bringing that to life is quite a challenge. And we committed to defining that and bringing it to life, which we'll talk about a little bit later. The third was that relationships create outcomes, not transactions. We're in the relationship business. We're trusted partners, and we need to make sure that's part of any plans we have moving forward. And finally, we're going to choose right over easy, which is my favorite value, sometimes the most difficult one, and that we had a lot of difficult decisions in front of us. But instead of coming in as a new CEO and coming across like somehow I would have all the answers, it was more important to understand what the organization felt and then get it from the perspective of our members, our prospective members, our employees. So I went out and engaged in a pretty significant research engagement. And the firm came in and helped us develop a series of questions, pretty significant questions. And we were really careful in how we designed those, and that too many organizations ask questions. Are you satisfied? Do you like something that's going on? And I was more interested in questions like, what's standing in your way of fully doing business with us? What are the things we could be changing? Well, it became very clear to me when we got this feedback that it was significant. It was a tremendous amount of data, and there was a lot of opportunity. But that's when I was able to call my good friend, Jim Cardwell, who I was blessed enough to meet 3 or 4 years earlier as part of his 3062 groups. And Jim and I instantly hit it off and had a lot of deep conversations. So Jim and I started talking about, okay, we've got all this data. How do we create a high-performing operating model that we can consume this and, quite frankly, simplify it in a way that folks can help us through that change curve? So, the research was compelling in that a lot of our members validated, and prospective members, that our brand wasn't resonating where we needed it to be. Our employees weren't necessarily making the emotional connections with our members to the level we needed to differentiate ourselves as part of our experience. And that, there were lots of other factors, but the one that concerned me the most is that only 40% of our members at that point in time suggested they would do another product or another service with us. And that's a pretty daunting finding. And that became the real call to action to our board, to our leadership team, to our employees. And so, I'll pause there, but bring Jim in the conversation. But I called Jim. Jim invited me down to his place, and we had a lot of conversations. We were probably a year in the planning because of how big this was. But I'm glad we put the time into it, because then we were able to accelerate it. And quite frankly, at a time where little did we know, putting this in place, or at least the core foundational blocks in place, we literally finished up about 45 days before the pandemic hit. And I tell you, I give Jim and his team, my team, a lot of credit. Without those things in place, I'm not sure we could have navigated through the change that we took on during the pandemic for that period of time. So I'll pause and turn it back to you, Jerry, if Jim wants to chime in there.
Yeah, I'm interested. It sounds like you did a lot of research. You found a lot of opportunities for change. It almost sounds a little overwhelming. How do you overcome that? I mean, you're new, and then here's all the things we need to fix. How do you create focus for the leadership team and the staff in that situation? And Jim, maybe you want to speak to that first.
Well, I think a lot of people have a strategy, but the strategy is 100 pages long with a lot of charts and graphs and all kinds of metrics and projects. And even if it was perfect, if you can't explain it and everyone can't support it because they can't explain it, how good is it? And so we really got this down to a single page where everything on the page was a specific bet, as opposed to a platitude like we're going to be, our members' favorite credit union, or we're going to be a best-in-class provider. I mean, all those things are important, but they're really more aspirations. We took very specific elements and put together the one-page strategy. Dave, do you want to talk about those elements?
Yeah, and Jim, just a little bit of backdrop too. Part of our planning process was making sure we had the right folks on the team. We wanted the right folks at the table. And it was really, we spent a lot of time talking about the number and how we could manage this process. And one of the things that Jim early on shared with me, and we still utilize to this day, is that we're at this particular table. We call it the guiding coalition. We're at the table, everybody's wearing the hat of CEO. And that really creates a powerful amount of ownership. And quite frankly, tapping into that inspiration that we're all here to build something special collectively and be able to cascade that up down across the organization. But to Jim's point, we were able to put the heart in banking. We just put that right at the core of our one-page strategy, right at the top, saying, wow, what a daunting commitment. But the reality of it is we don't believe people are making the emotional connections and helping folks with financial services, which is one of the most emotional activities that you're ever going to be involved in your life. And so it's important. And that's as powerful for our employees, as our members, as communities. But we also wanted to have some BHAGs out there. We wanted to have some 5-year goals that we felt that perhaps 70-80% probability of achieving, but we really wanted to set the tone that if this is going to be bold, it's going to take a bold effort. And then we really want to work on the laser focus on the 80-20s. I mean, what's really going to make a difference? And Jim did an incredible job helping us realize, if it's not going to move the bar for our members, employees, the communities we serve, or from a regulatory standpoint, don't focus on it. There's too many organizations are focused on trying to boil the ocean. The reality of it is we know there's 4 or 5 key things that really can drive and differentiate an organization. So we methodically work through defining those things and then creating those goals and milestones around that to the point where we had a very comprehensive document. And I think it's inspirational. I think it's laser focused. And I think it's thoughtful in that it can evolve. And it's not something we have certainly have evolved the document, but the substance and the strategic integrity has stayed since the day, week, month, we put that into effect, which is telling in itself the work that was put into that.
So the one-page strategy, the elements of it are, why are we here? What's our real purpose? And to put the heart in banking was the purpose. If we do that well, how could we measure our success? And so that's where the BHAGs came in. I think we had 2 or 3 things that we thought, if we're doing this, we're making progress on our reason for being here. And then we looked at what are the core capabilities. Under the Jim Collins model of good to great, BHAG should be set at a 70% probability level. What that means is that under current assumptions, you can't get there. But anyway, the beauty of it is that if it's simple enough and compelling enough and people get it, you can actually create a lot of creativity and innovation to make it happen, which is what David and his team did. The other part is just a business model, and I'll just go through this quickly. So instead of trying to be everything to everyone, you try to look at where your sweet spot is and really focus on a certain element of your customer base or member base in credit union terms. The second thing is what products are the engine of our strategic success that we can offer to those products capably and make money doing it. And then the next part would be what are our priority distribution channels, what's our geographic footprint, also looking at what's our value proposition to that with those products, with that customer group. And then also, what's our money-making recipe? So how does it all add up to, where does the money come from to fund our growth and to serve our members more effectively?
So it sounds like not just rethinking the strategy itself, but rethinking it in a way that is cascading operationally, or a lot of change, how people do their jobs. And I know from a change management perspective that established teams can have trouble adapting to major change. And this certainly sounds like a lot of change. Dave, how did that play out in this case?
Well, we first used the data to kind of create the call to action, right? That's the voice of our member, the voice of our employee, the voice of the community we serve. There's certainly a voice of the business itself and the data itself. And when we started to align that, it became fairly clear that we needed to get focus in certain key areas. So I think the most importantly was getting the right folks aligned in the organization. And we did that in a couple different ways. One, created a couple groups in our organizational structure. One, we talked about the Guiding Coalition, and then an extended group, which I would define as our leadership team, basically the officers of our company. And really started with that core group and made sure that, and using the data as a call to action, making sure that it was representative and felt like everybody could embrace it and foster it, lead it in a way and get everybody excited. But we also had to go through the exercise, which is probably the part that most folks dread in organizations, that the reality is that we've got A, B, and C players, and the A and B players are going to get us to where we need to be. And the C players, most of the time, are standing in the way of progress. And, through assessing, basically using characteristics of a next level leader and working through that process, undoubtedly, we had to clear the highway for those who are high performers and really create an environment for those folks to flourish. But we had to also deal with some folks that, in a fair way, but certainly had to transition some folks because they just weren't up to the level. And that's one of the things that we deal with all the time. Unfortunately, jobs outgrow people and people outgrow jobs. It's bringing that realization to the table, so you're helping those, because that's not beneficial for anybody. So, but getting the right folks aligned, getting them excited and inspired about it, and really a belief that we can make the culture anything we want it to be. We are the culture. So what and how do we want to go about this? And I was very fortunate to have a really great team around me. And, subsequently, I think that's the key to any change. And then that reinforcement and that consistency. Jim and I went around our entire organization and broke it down area by area by area as we started to cascade some of the key pieces we were putting in place for measurement, and certainly the software that Jim's company has created, which has been fantastic for our organization. But all those things, either it was a small group, larger group, no matter what size, no matter who we were speaking with, we were very conscientious about using the same language and using that one-page strategy in every single discussion with my board. Anybody who want to sit down or have a conversation had that one-page strategy in front of me, and we were using the same language to get that laser focus and that call to action throughout the organization. And I'll fight Jim in the conversation because he lived it with me. We had a lot of conversations, a lot of folks as we were socializing it, and then certainly start to execute.
Yeah, one of the things, Jerry, to your question about people resisting change, I like the saying, if you build it, they might come. If you build it with them, they're already there. And so essentially the senior leaders, actually the guiding coalition, where we elevated everyone to David's level and to think about the enterprise like everyone owned the business together and worked together, made a big difference. And then aligning the departments with the one-page strategy so that they had their own purpose that supported it. But it wasn't really, hey, here's a strategy, come up with something. We actually looked at, what are the metrics that come from the bets on the table? Which departments, usually it's 2 or 3 core departments that actually have 80-20, a highly critical impact on the achievement of that metric. So instead of giving it to one department, we gave it to the 3 or 4 that had the biggest impact. And then we created interdependent leadership where people worked cross-silo, cross-functionally to work together to achieve these numbers. And David and his team did a great job of, at different levels, of having dialogues and progress to plan, and dialogues that weren't really updates as much as they were problem solving or problem identification, working together to celebrate the wins and to create more, to remove barriers and that sort of thing. So it was really more of a, an engaged in the business, really running the business and making a difference.
Yeah, we added a couple of Tiger teams as well. We wanted to reward our high performers. We really wanted the right folks leaning forward in our organization. So we challenged them with some pretty significant topics of member centricity and employee focus, and bringing those to life, which really helped as well cascade that, but also supported our commitment to a meritocracy and really differentiating the high performers of our organization and giving them those opportunities they earn for career pathing and exposure and things like that.
And on the Tiger teams, we put A-level players or B players, and we very carefully picked who was at the nodes of the network to make those elements happen. And both Tiger teams and the Guiding Coalition did a great job.
So, but even with great people like that in place, one of the things you really need for high performance is a very unified commitment. And I've watched in your survey results as alignment has increased substantially over the last few years. And I've seen clients do that before with things like tying departmental goals to strategic organization goals. And then in the department, every person has to have at least one goal that ties to the department goal, and build the connection out that way to make it part of people's jobs, how they support the strategic goals of the company. What what specifically did you do at SECU to drive alignment to the very high level that we see now?
I mean, the tight alignment is obviously critical, and it starts from the top, quite frankly. We have to demonstrate and mirror the behaviors we expect. And, we were already transitioning from, and certainly big difference between a command and control leader that's just cascading some sort of demand or setting some sort of level of accountability to actually leaning forward and participating with the organization, and everybody in the organization leaning forward and participating at the same time. But that alignment's critical, but it starts at the top. And Jim will tell you, there's not a meeting, and this wasn't because I felt like I wanted to be involved. We're all trying to build something special together. That's where many of us get our fulfillment. So I never missed any interaction and I wanted to participate. That's why it was great that Jim helped facilitate that, because I wanted to be side by side with my team. I want to make sure that we're all taking that ownership, because if you don't have true ownership in it, then it's hard for you to cascade it across the organization. It's hard for you to advocate. It's hard for you to tell the story. And I wanted each and every one of them to feel like they were telling their story, which was our collective story. And they had the one-page strategy that they were part of designing, creating, and bringing to life. And all those things, I think, are just critical. And then the commitment to be disciplined, to continue to foster and embrace that type of culture. It's not a one and done. That's the beginning. And then you've got to bring it to life every single day and every single interaction, to the point where it becomes part of our DNA. And even then, you're on guard, because the world's changing at such a rapid pace around us. We've got to make sure we're continuing to be relevant and significant in all those lives that we serve, all of our constituents.
So if the top 50 or so people in his company were all on the same page with the same priorities, with the same idea about the business, the whole company got a lot more focused.
Yeah, that makes sense. We've also seen, tracking in the survey, some big gains in accountability. What were some of the tools and process changes that you feel have really driven increased accountability at the credit?
Yeah, that's something that Jim and I talked a lot about. We were very interested in the delta between engagement and accountability, right? You can have a highly engaged organization with very low accountability. And I had a concern, and certainly where we started our accountability, at least as of the 21st January 2021, I think it was on the 66. And there was a 19-point delta between accountability and engagement. Today, there's a 10-point, and I'd like to get that even tighter. But I have to tell you that I think accountability in some ways has gotten a bad rap, because these command and control leaders use accountability. I'm going to hold you accountable. Well, there's a difference than inspiring a group where they want to hold themselves accountable. And I'm really blessed to have a team. Because of the way we designed this, nobody wants to let the other person down. It's a true team. And so the motivation and inspiration is coming within each of us to be our best, to bring our A game all the time. And subsequently, we've raised that level of accountability, and then cascading that across the organization, and then using the tools. You can't iterate enough or highlight enough the need for data and the need for the tools. And Jim brought in software connections, which is incredible. We branded it Pulse because we wanted to be part of that heartbeat, kind of our theme, but it's Jim's software. We brought that to life in a way where, but it was implemented before in our organization, but without the leadership and understanding, this isn't a tool to check up on you. This is a tool to help us all succeed together. And that changes how we do dialogues. It changes, and folks want to keep score. They want to know how they're contributing. They want to see that alignment, especially your high performers. So I think that's a little bit of a misnomer where folks are reluctant to hold folks accountable. The reality is to tap into the folks in a way where they're inspired, where they want to hold themselves accountable, and then have the tools in place so that we can coach and provide feedback, and vice versa. It's two-way communication, so we can grow and learn. I mean, my fundamental job is to block and tackle for my organization, to get the resources my organization needs to succeed. And it's almost like a reverse, triangle from an organizational structure. I'm blocking and tackling, and I want my team at the top that are serving our members to have everything they need to be the best they can be. And, it's my fundamental belief that transformation comes from all of us unleashing our full potential at the same time, because we believe we can, and we start to exceed our own expectations, which creates a level of confidence that's contagious, that everybody wants to be part of. And I think literally one by one, that's how we've cascaded across the organization to the point where it's fun being part of a successful team that's growing, that's energized, that's leaning forward. And accountability is no more, I think, considered this some sort of negative connotation. It's more around, wow, look how I'm contributing, look how I'm showing up, look how I'm lining. And there's a level of fulfillment that's coming from that just resonates across our organization.
Right.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit more, though, because it sounds, you mentioned the tool and the software and so forth, but tell me a little more about the analytics side of it. What gets tracked and how people talk about that? Because, I mean, tools like that, you're describing them being used in a very constructive way, but I've also seen them used sort of the other way of talking about accountability as really just checking up on people and pointing out where they haven't reached their numbers.
Yeah, I think it's really important to embrace. We talk all the time about the voice of our employee, voice of our member, voice of the data itself, and the voice of the business, right? Our business has certain needs. The data is showing us certain things. Our employees are saying certain things. Our members are giving us feedback. And we survey all the time. And believe it or not, I'm always concerned about survey fatigue, but my organization just seems to love the opportunity to provide feedback, which is fantastic. So as long as those participation rates stay up there, I'm going to keep asking the questions, and we get more and more information. But it also helps us forge our agenda, and folks see their contributions in that agenda and know that not only we're listening, but we're actually doing something about it. We're taking actions. I think it's just, I keep driving home that message. The data is so important, and where you can see the alignment across those areas. And that's why I'm so pleased with some of the correlation we're seeing between, a lot of people say happy employees, happy members, but I would like to say engaged employees that are holding themselves to a higher level of accountability, are also engaging our members in a way that they haven't been engaged before. And even in a sense, having our members with our value proposition almost feel, and I use the word accountable loosely, but that they should have a relationship with us. We have knocked down a lot of those, some based on their feedback, maybe barriers to fully doing business, whatever those things might be. So I just think it's important to make it more about the data than one person or one group's opinion. But then obviously the opinions are really critical as we collectively share our experiences and biases towards certain things as relates to certain initiatives or strategies, et cetera. So we have spent a good amount of money building out a group that works on business intelligence and shares that data all the time. Previous to 2018, I believe a lot of it was anecdotal, and I think a lot of it was, and so being fact-based is such a critical characteristic of a high-performing organization. So this all helped bring that to life.
The one thing the connection software has it has a lot of information embedded in it. So if it's not like we're asking on a 5-point scale, is this person a team player, or are they a collaborative, or are they team player? We actually have specific metrics and specific projects and specific dialogues and other things to track that actually show that people are, doing the things that most people rate subjectively. But anyway, one of the things, so we met probably about a year ago. I met with our internal consulting team, which David put 3 superstars on that team, which made a big difference. But anyway, we're looking at, if performance is the vertical axis, what's the horizontal axis that's driving performance? And what we came up with, it was, and actually, interestingly, some other companies in our client base came up with the same conclusion, is that the dialogues are really the juice that makes the engine run. And anyway, so the dialogues are a touch point that happens depending on the type. There's a metric dialogue, a project dialogue, and then there's an individual department and organizational dialogue. And that sequence of communication and coordination and feedback happens on a monthly basis. And it kind of creates a situation. When I ask people if you had projects due at the end of the year, when do you actually do the work on those projects? And every group I've ever worked with knows the answer to that. It's probably early December. So the dialogues kind of created December 31st every month. But the intent of the dialogues is to be future focused, not present and past. So people don't like to be criticized, or they don't like to be questioned about the present and past, but if we can say, let's work together to kind of make this work more effectively, how can we solve this problem? Or boy, you did a great job on this specific thing. You start building the company, which David's done a really great job of doing. And people are, excited to try to keep pushing the frontier to the right. And, on the right side of the bell-shaped curve. And it really makes a difference.
Well, it sounds like an extremely structured approach to organizational communication. And when you can make that happen, we've seen in a lot of organizations that can have a very, very positive impact. But speaking about curves, Jim, I remember learning about the J curve of change, right? The theory that initially change causes a lot of disruption, a drop in performance, people become stressed, confused, maybe less engaged. I'm curious about what the two of you did to minimize the potential for any drop-offs, especially for engagement, but with other metrics as well.
Yeah, as Jim said, I think the dialogues were critical, and breaking that down and doing those consistently and touching base with each and every one of our associates and providing feedback. But we tried to look at it from a bottom-up kind of communication and making sure that we're really capturing the voice of our employees and through those dialogues. And then a little bit of an enterprise view of, we created something every Thursday at the beginning of every month, first week. I have what I call a strategic session, and every employee in the organization dials in, and we talk about the progress. We talk about very specifically those 80-20 goals. We talk about the one-page strategy, and we share some of the things we've implemented based on our employees' feedback, and hold ourselves accountable to delivering on the things that our employees and our members have asked us for. And so I think a combination of the bottom-up swell of wanting to share and using dialogues and really working on, and again, those dialogues are based on the 80-20, but there's also a component of personal development for our employees. Because most of the time, every organization I've been in, employees really want very clear career pathing, and having a conversation around how to align the 80-20, how to create opportunities, makes our employees feel more empowered to go out and create opportunities for themselves, understanding where the organization's going, what we need in the future. So that seems to have helped a lot. And then again, this constantly using different forums to communicate with our employees. I have town hall meetings regularly, where it's just an open, basically, forum to have dialogue around what's going on in the organization, and hear from our employees and have our employees talk with each other. So we go out of our way to try to create opportunities, both in formal and informal settings, to drive home the things that I think are very specific to what differentiates us as an organization. But change is always difficult, but that reinforcement, same language, having the one-page strategy, having all these things to anchor to. And the other thing is making sure everybody knows we're in it together and that we pick each other up. And that was really important, especially through the pandemic, that, we were all dealing with lots of things, personal, professional, personal, you name it. And we really created an environment where, you leave nobody behind. We pick you up. If you're not up that day, somebody else will pick you up and keep them around, keep those things. And to the point where I just fundamentally believe our employees not only want what's best for the organization, but for each other. And that was all culminated. We had a annual celebration this year. It's the first time in the company's history that we paid a performance-based bonus that was earned by the employees by hitting these 80-20 goals on track, and and then gave significant amount of recognition awards, all aligned with the values, characteristics, all the things that we put in place. And it just was just an incredible experience to kind of feel that milestone of celebration, because this company for a lot of years has been operating at a level pretty consistent, and we've now jumped it up a level. We were in the 25th to 50th percentile. We're now closer to the 75th percentile performance, so between the 50th and 75th by the end of this year. And by the way, those goals we set, those BHAGs in 2025, which is a 70% probability, we're pretty close to, we may have a shot of achieving at least 2 out of 3 of those, which is going to be a celebration for the whole team, but certainly Jim and I will probably go out and have a nice meal. It's, man, I can't believe we put those, the team put those goals up. We actually have a shot of hitting these. So that first set's 2025. But one of the things is the company never made 100 basis points ROA. As you can see, we made 84. When I got here, we never made more than 54, 60 basis points ROA. So we're right there where we want to be. Same thing with member experience. And now our brand is spreading. Last year, we got 1 billion impressions in this organization for the things we did. That's an incredible number, 1 billion impressions through social media and other things that has now created a swell of membership growth. So now we're seeing that metric, which sometimes is the hardest to move for a large organization, already has 260,000 members, but we're now seeing pretty significant membership growth as that word is continuing to spread, and our employees are telling that story all over the place about our special organization.
One thing I just wanted to say quickly is that a lot, there's an extrinsic and intrinsic motivation. Most companies are extrinsic, reward and punishment based. David's created an environment that's intrinsically motivated, which is recognition for achieving something that's important, a feeling like I'm growing, and a feeling like I'm on a team that's going someplace. So building that kind of culture has created a lot of energy and a lot of, feeling of, I wouldn't go anywhere else. I love being on this team. And, we're all in it together kind of thing. And so, David's done a great job with his team to create that kind of environment.
I appreciate it, Jim. Appreciate all your help. And Jerry, I appreciate all your help. When we go over the results, you provide a lot of insights to our organization, and we celebrate that, but we're constantly challenging, as you know, on what we need to be. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter where you start. It's where you're going. It doesn't matter where you sit today. It's where you want to take those metrics. We're all about just doing the right. And I'm going to simplify it, but honestly, this is where we started. Just do the right thing day in and day out, every day. Do the right thing. It's amazing what outcomes can follow. I know it sounds a little bit Pollyanna, but the reality of it is that's what it's about. It doesn't have to be as complex as we made it. That's one thing that Jim helped me a lot, because we partner well, and that he has a really strong process mind to him. I'm obviously a people leader. We married that together, and I think we've created a really neat marriage and have proven that. But I give all the credit to my team and my employees, because they're the ones who make it happen every day.
Well, it's an impressive story, and it's been fascinating for me as sort of the outside assessor. I'm not hands-on involved in the changes that are going in there, but just coming in periodically to do the assessment with the survey and seeing impressive change, and impressive change straight through the pandemic, when there was all kinds of other disruption. In fact, one of the questions that came in right at the very beginning, in-person to remote work contribute to any of those OpEx efficiency gains? And I could see that working for or against. It's curious. What's the story there?
A couple different things. One, I think we're more productive. We basically, and again, through all the things we've laid out in this discussion, has made us more productive because we're more focused and we're not wasting our time on non-value added things. I think we were really good at adding things. We were terrible at letting things go, right? I don't think any organization's good at eliminating things. And I think that was part of our issue, weighing us down. I also think creating that meritocracy and really differentiating our high performers and really rewarding those for going that extra mile. We're in a hybrid structure for part of our organization. Our branches are there every day, in person, but it's only helped us. But none of this would have worked if we didn't have the structure in place, because with the structure in place. But one of the things that I didn't mention, and probably is one of the most important components, is the trust. you've got to build trust and credibility to be able to lead the organization. And I think we probably earned a lot of trust by doing the right things during the pandemic. I don't think any of us were trained in business school on making what we thought at the time were life and death decisions on whether to open or whether to do certain things. But by putting our employees first and our actions speaking louder than words, and I had a simple saying during the pandemic, let's say what we do and do what we say, and let's acknowledge that we don't know. And we're going to acknowledge we don't know. But we're going to get through it together, whatever it is. And I think showing the human side, and I think we don't talk enough about vulnerability in leadership. We talk about empathy. We talk about a lot of other characteristics, perseverance, grit. But I think seeing vulnerability and that human, authentic nature, we were all leveled, let's face it, during the pandemic in a certain way. And I think, the true character came out of folks that stepped up and did the right things. And I think that helped us when we started regaining momentum, because you kind of go in this survival, you're surviving, but you really want to thrive, right? Big difference between surviving and thriving. And we were able to turn that corner and keep that momentum going. But for a while there, I felt like we were surviving because we had no idea what was coming down the pipe, both from a health standpoint, economic standpoint. And it's not, quite frankly, all this has served us extremely well, because this is one of the most difficult economic environments. Financial institutions weren't built to operate in inverted, twisted yield curves and the things that we've dealt with, and rates going up 450 basis points. So we can spend all day, but those are the things that sometimes don't show up. But its reality is the things that we put in place years ago and continue to put in place every day allows us to handle whatever comes down the road as an organization. And that confidence, credibility, and trust, I think, is what sustains this model.
Yeah, and that trust, you mentioned showing vulnerability. That is a big part of interpersonal trust, and I'm sure it had a big impact. Go ahead, Jim.
I think that the confidence and trust was built a lot by clarity. Everyone knew what the company was trying to do, and they had a picture in their mind of what it was. They saw the purpose of doing it, and they had a part that they had to do. So I think clarity made a big difference. I think communication through the Tiger teams and the guiding coalition and the all hands discussion and the dialogues showed that we were investing, or David and his team were investing in people and setting them up to win. And then another thing is something I call co-alignment. Co-alignment is top-down alignment and bottom-up alignment through communication. So you kind of have a double alignment. You have a top-down clarity where it gets really clear what the company's trying to do, and then who in the company needs to do it, and then which departments support that. And it's multiple. It's like a Pareto bar chart. There's 3 or 4 departments that support every metric or every project, and then same. And I think the getting it to build the bottom-up communication is really important too, because constantly touching it, constantly recognizing performance, constantly encouraging people to bring, how can we do this better to the table? I think the bottom-up communication made a big difference. A lot of people build pieces of this, but they don't build a connected system. And the connected system has to be in place with clear alignment and clear bottom-up communication. And it's really those elements that really make that's the algorithm. That's what makes things work.
Something else you mentioned, Dave, I wanted to comment on was, clearing things off the plate in addition to adding them. There's a question in our database, it's part of your survey, but I use it with a lot of clients that asks, are we good at eliminating non-strategic activities? I think the only item with a lower norm than that is the one, I get paid enough. It's people have a hard time agreeing with that because companies really struggle with it. I did want to ask you, at the beginning, you described sort of, very gently, sometimes people outgrow jobs outgrow people. So, it's you're sorting into A players, B players, C players. Some people needed to exit that. Did you get much pushback? And we actually have a question from the audience about, how you managed the rumor mill when C players were exiting the organization.
Yeah, I think that was a turning point because on twofold. One, and I think part of it was because some of this was taking place during COVID, and there was a bit of a crisis call to action, which aligned the board around me to give me the support to do what I needed to do to navigate through that. And so sometimes you have organizations get a little static, and sometimes they believe the culture is, nice is table stakes, being nice, but the culture can become too nice to the point where they don't address that, but they don't realize it's hurting other organizations. Somebody's being impacted by poor performance in the organization. But I stood up in front of all my employees and had the conversation head on, why we were doing it, why we needed to do it, what steps we took, ensured them we were fair, ensured them all those things. And I tell you, it's a couple of employees were impacted actually, within 6 months, wrote letters back thanking us for, how we handled it. And that gets around. We're fair. We were clear on why. It was done with, we were thoughtful about the approach and how we did. And I found that more employees were somewhat relieved because they were kind of stuck themselves over their head in some ways, really didn't want to go on the journey and didn't know how to get from point A to point B. And we actually helped them transition. And a lot of them, we helped find jobs in other organizations that are more suited for them even. So we went the extra mile. But I think that shows the care and the authenticity. And again, I'm not looking for, those are difficult conversations. Those are difficult things we have to do. And there's nothing positive, but how you handle it, I think, was remarkable. And I think the employees that we reinforced, those employees that were staying with us, how important they were to us. And I think they also got a little bit of a bounce because they're like, hey, I was chosen. Dave didn't, and his team, when he came in, didn't inherit me. He selected me to go forward on this. And I don't mean that in some sort of top-down manner, but I think there was some validation for those that we said, you're an A player, you're a B player, we're building this business around you. You are the core of the business. I don't think they ever heard that either, the A and B players. So I think a combination of that, but I could just remember that period of time. And I give a lot of credit to my board because I don't think my board even realized we needed to transform until they started seeing the data. But I think my board would tell you today that they didn't even realize how much energy we've breathed into the organization now and the excitement we've created. And now they're all talking about emotional connections and all those great things, which they've always believed in. But we got so operationally focused, sometimes you lose track of that true 80-20 and why you're there and who you're there to serve and how you win and all those things that Jim alluded to that are key components of the one-page strategy. So talk about getting on the same song sheet. That's so symbolic of the one-page strategy. It literally got us on one page, all on the same page. And that's literally and figuratively. And I give a lot of credit, again, to Jim and his team for helping us and your support, Jerry. And just glad we could share that story today.
Yeah. You mentioned, just coming out and telling people what they're A players, B players, giving them that positive feedback. And you mentioned the Tiger teams. We had a question from the audience because you mentioned, how they connect in their internal networks. Did you use any special analytics, like organizational network analysis, to identify the people you wanted to be the leaders of those Tiger teams? Or
yeah, Jim, I think, Jim and I worked together. We got a lot of feedback from a lot of folks. These folks were head and shoulders, just kind of rose to the top. I don't think there was a lot of a debate. I think we, again, wanted to challenge some of our emerging leaders with an opportunity like this. And really, the two topics were huge. One was on the employee experience, one was on the member experience. And we provided them all the data and had them start to chunk that down and really create. But and kind of an outshoot of that was creating some employee peer groups. And then we've also leveraged all this work, and that's a whole nother topic, but we've done an incredible amount of work with diversity, equity, and inclusion coming out of these groups and around the employee and taking that to the next level. And we use the same foundation and structure to be able to create an organization where D&I is part of our DNA and everything we do. And I think that's why it's just such a powerful backbone to our organization, because we now layer on and build on and get more sophisticated as needed by keeping it simple at the same time. So long-winded way of saying, no, I think the analytics where we kind of created, and we got to wait, and Jim could chime in. A lot of organizations were using these 9 boxes, but they weren't doing much with a lot of the boxes in the 9 box. We tried to get it down to, I call it was a 4 box, right? You're a high performer or high potential, or you're not, in a sense, right? Versus And again, nothing against any of that methodology, but for us, we just wanted to simplify to say, these are A, B, and C players. And truly what we're trying, I think it's also symbolic for who are our high performers and high potentials and who are high performers, and just make sure we're giving those folks what they need. And again, I've been around long enough to realize that the high performers suffer from low performers. And when the low performers are addressed, your high performers even take off even more. Sometimes the highway gets clogged up and they can't get done what they need to get done. It helps them differentiate. So we have a responsibility to our entire organization to always make sure that we're recognizing and rewarding our top performers, but addressing the non-performers. And by the way, we put a lot of training and development and effort into that. That's not we are not a punitive organization. If somebody's not performing, there's not some automatic. It's after we've exhausted every opportunity to coach up and develop. And it's a lot of times it's just in the attitude. And we know that those attitudes are what undermine any type of evolution and success in an organization.
So yeah, the one thing that the David's team did really well is they provided a lot of resource materials and a lot of coaching, individual and group-oriented coaching, which created a lot of consistency. And if people were having problems, they met with them very quietly and coached them to help them lift their performance, which I think did make a big difference. That internal team, which we didn't really talk a lot about, but I think they've done a really great job a sophisticated job of really orienting new people coming into the company and making sure that the bar is set at a certain level. When we did the A, B, and C players, the framework that we used was the Bain framework, and Bain felt that they made a big deal about the 9 box is a great concept, but it doesn't really work that well because it's usually very subjective. So we tried to use quantitative type measures to place people. And it wasn't 4 bucks. On one axis, we had whether they fit the culture and kind of the direction we were heading. And then the other was performance. So, so it could be a low or high performer or a low or high cultural fit. And so, we used that, but we used, are they an active learner? Do they have a career trajectory of achievement? I think in the book, the Bain has called Time, Talent, Energy. I would recommend that to anyone that's listening. And it's a very, really good book. And it really there's a whole section on talent that talks about how to do A, B, and C players. And that's the method that we used.
Okay. And Jim, you brought up a good point. I'm sorry, Jay, I know we're out of time, but we did put all of our leaders through leadership training and a year of leadership sessions. And we went out of our way to make sure that we did that in a way where the leader was also bringing in those they were leading and having these joint sessions. So we made sure that dialogues were happening in a certain way and that feedback, because sometimes you assume everybody's good at providing feedback and constructive feedback and things like that. So that also was an additional piece that we put in place concurrently.
Yeah, no, that's great. And there's a lot more we could talk about. And I'm sorry we didn't even get through all the questions that people submitted, but I thank everyone for their time and attention. And I did just want to mention one last thing, and I'll put up on the screen here that we do have another webinar coming up in a month. Similar to this one, I'll be hosting a couple of guests, Dr. Deb Lee and Dr. Robert Lewis, to talk about the pipeline that PepsiCo has developed. A lot of people might not know this, but PepsiCo alumni make up a bigger portion of Fortune 500 CEOs than any other company except GE, which is much larger and has been at it for a long time. So they have an amazing talent development program there. And when you expand that to see how many CHROs have they placed in the Fortune 500, it's an even larger percentage. So look forward to doing that. I hope you can join us on June 8th for that session. Jim and Dave, thank you so much. This has been fascinating. You guys have done some great stuff at SECU, and look forward to continuing to watch that organization grow and succeed.
If people have other questions, they can reach out to David or I. I'm sure we'd be happy to answer whatever questions they might have.
Yes, and we'll have a recording of this session available shortly.
Thank you very much,
Thanks,
Jerry.
everyone.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody.
Okay. Bye-bye.